Hey guys, so Lord here, back again with another review. Today we'll be taking a look at the McFarlane Toys Spawn Universe Dark Redeemer. Now before we get into it here, let's first take a look-see at both the front and the back of the packaging. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now before we get into the meat and taters of this review, the Dark Redeemer does come with the same sword as the first release of the Redeemer in this line, this time painted black. Had to reference the Rolling Stones there because it is what it is, man. But you can see that this is a cross-shaped sword, like a big-ass broadsword, or buster sword as I like to call it. Really awesome there. Not a whole lot of paint on this version, but I think there's probably enough on there to get by. That said, speaking of the first release, he does also come with the same two wings as that first release. This time, again, painted black, as the Rolling Stones always said. And they, of course, have some gray wash to them. Light gray wash, some white wash there. Bring out some of those feather details. And they do have these little ball hinges, which can hinge forward and back, and then they also hinge up and down in the wing itself, but that's super tight. I didn't have to heat this guy up, but it's also been quite the scorcher here in upstate New York, and I've been sweating my ass off making these reviews for you guys, so don't say I don't do anything for you. That said, as I always recommend with any review I've ever done of any of these Redeemer figures, I would highly suggest you use the handy dandy DC Multiverse flight stand as a kind of sort of doll stand to hold these guys up with the wings so the joints don't get loose and so they don't take any shelf dives. That said, if you're not into McFarlane toys like I am, you're going to have to buy some doll stands off eBay or something that match the height of this guy. That said, if you do collect McFarlane toy stuff like I do, you probably have plenty of these lying around that you're not using. So, with that being said, taking a closer look at the Dark Redeemer here, and he, of course, comes with the hockey puck display stand, which actually fits nice and snug on both feet. So, that is a plus. That is a plus indeed. But setting that off to the side here. Before I get too far ahead of myself, I gotta give a shout out to the local friend who shall not be named for privacy reasons for hooking this guy up the low price of $8 or $7.50. I can't remember because I always include sales tax, maybe even overdoing it on the sales tax just to make sure I don't owe anyone money. Ugh. But for that price, you really can't beat that, because this kicks the shit out of most $25 figures on the pegs nowadays. Marvel Legends. And to get it for $7, $8, less than 10, let alone half price, that's a freaking steal, man. Despite the fact that I still have some issues with this figure that the other two Redeemers had going for him as well, so it's not really his fault. Again, for the low price of whatever I freaking paid, this is a freaking deal, man. It's a bargain, as my good buddy John Wilde used to say. So, with that being said, as far as articulation on this guy goes, his head will rotate. You can look up a little bit, you can look down a little bit. Still has the mohawk, which you want to watch out for because you don't want to break any of those spikes off. But again, it is a scorcher, so they're a little bit less stiff than usual. So there's that, I suppose. It's got the ball hinge shoulders that do move all around in that socket joint there. Then they can hinge out to the side, can hinge down. This side is a little bit tighter than this side, but in all fairness, all my Redeemers have like a loose left shoulder hinge, so he's just part of the gang. That said, he does have a bicep swivel, double jointed elbow, Gives you a pretty good range. And doesn't look terrible. It's not great, but it's not bad. The top joint, I think, can move a little bit more. There we go. Yeah, you can get some pretty good range out of that. Again, it's not the worst looking thing, but not the best. It's definitely better than the Cliffs of Dover hinges we were seeing for a while, that's for sure. And then he has the ball hinge wrists. Trigger fingers, which I'm not into. I wish they gave him grip hands, especially since this is the third release of this, I'm going to say type of character, because this isn't exactly the same as the regular Redeemers. I don't know if he's a good guy or a bad guy or what. Maybe he's neutral. But this guy goes by the Forsaken in the comics, the name Forsaken, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if this is supposed to be the first Redeemer ever, which was Jason Wynn, or if it's supposed to be the Redeemer from the early 2000s, you know, the guy with the blonde hair. He kind of looked like Ken from Barbie, if I'm being honest. I don't know if it's that guy or if it's a new guy entirely. But with that being said, of all the Redeemers we've gotten so far, this guy has some of the nicest paint applications that I've seen on any of the figures. The exception of the Platinum Edition, which is the Platinum Edition, so automatically it's going to have a little bit better paint than a standard release. This guy is not too shabby. I like the little red accents here and there. The silver looks pretty primo as far as molded silver plastic goes. It doesn't come off as cheap or anything like the gold on the first Redeemer. And on top of that, it contrasts well with this dark kind of purplish blue color of his undersuit there. So really nice colors on this guy. He's got some black too in the helmet in particular. But of the three, I think this is probably my favorite. That, and since he has an actual name, the Forsaken, again, I think that makes him a little bit more interesting. Still kind of curious why they didn't call him Forsaken on the box. Maybe there's some religious meaning to that, and Todd didn't want a lawsuit on his ass, but either way. He's got some torso articulation. It will rotate and crunch forward and back. I don't want to move that too much because I don't want to loosen it up. But I will move the waist for you. That does rotate. It does move back and forth. A little bit better than the torso does. That said, what is up with this diaper? He's got like half his back on here. I don't know why they didn't just cut it here where there's an actual seam line at, but that's just kind of weird to me. That said, the hips on this guy are probably the best out of all three Redeemer figures we've got in this line so far. They kick forward, they kick back, they're nice and tight. Going out to the side a little loose. Actually, that side wasn't too bad. No, never mind. They aren't loose. I'm just tripping. He does have a little thigh quiver there. I say quiver because it's not much of a cut. Actually, it moves in quite a bit. Moves out quite a bit, too. What about the other side? Actually, he's not bad as far as that goes. That's okay. That's better than I thought. This guy's slowly starting to surprise me. Holy shit. He's got double knee, which looks alright. It's a little flat, but no Cliffs of Dover again, so that's good. And then his ankles, by far the best. They have detents, but again, the weight of the wings is going to weigh down heavy on these, so keep that in mind. He does have a swivel at the top of the foot there, as well as the ankle rocker, the toe hinge, which is, again, tight in neutral. Well, not on this side. This side does not flatten out on any of these figures. I don't know what's up with that. I don't know if anyone's got a mod for this so it can flatten out, but it's like his toe is slightly curled on the left foot, but not on the right. And it's like that on all three Redeemers I got. So I don't know what's up with that. That's a little weird. Maybe I'm the only one pointing that out, but I can't unsee it. It's right frickin' there, man. Like, his foot is not flat. But that just seems to be how this figure is, which is very odd. That said, he does have 2 peg holes at the bottom of the feet and 2 peg holes on the back for those wings, which I'm actually going to attach off camera to save us some time. And he'll have his wings and the DC Multiverse stand supporting the weight when we take a look at some size comparisons. But with that being said, out of all the Redeemers in the Spawn Universe line, I think this is my favorite. I like the colors a lot. You know, silver and black and dark purple and red. That's a really good palette for a dark character, such as the Dark Redeemer, if I can say it without getting tongue-tied here. That said, if anyone's read the Spawn Universe comics, let me know who this character is. I'm very curious, because the whole concept seems kind of cool. Redeemer that's kind of fallen from grace, and it's kind of like an anti-hero or a bad guy now. That seems like a really awesome concept, although if you read some of the Spawn comics before, the Redeemers were always kind of jerks. I don't recall one not being a jerk, but, you know, I could be wrong about that. I haven't read all the Spawn comics in the world, so I don't know a whole heck of a lot about some of the later characters like the Redeemer or the Curse or characters like that. I mostly know about Overkill and Tremor and Violator, of course, and Malbolgia, Angela. You know, the ones from the first two waves of Vintage figures. But with all that being said, let's now move on and take a look at some size comparisons. First up, here is the Dark Redeemer next to the closest thing we ever got to a Dark Redeemer-esque character from the Vintage Spawn line. This is the Redeemer from Spawn Series 3 or 4. This is back when they had the blue card backs with the lightning bolts on them. But with that being said, this is the Jason Wynn Redeemer, so I'm not entirely sure if this Dark Redeemer character is supposed to be a modern version of this Redeemer, or if it's a new character entirely. So let me know about that in the comments below. That said, there was a Dark Redeemer style repaint of a later Redeemer figure released in the, I want to say it was the Art of Spawn or Spawn Classic comic covers, when they were really pushing the Staction figure thing in the early to mid 2000s. There was a Redeemer figure released with the gold and blue colors, but then they made a repaint with that black and silver color palette that this Dark Redeemer has. Not sure if that was just a cool repaint to sell a figure again, or if it was the Dark Redeemer himself, but again, let me know about that in the comments below, because I am very curious, because I don't have that figure, and I actually wouldn't mind picking one of those up at some point. Next up, and for your Spawn Universe Redeemer comparison, here is the Dark Redeemer alongside the Redeemer from Wave 1 of this Spawn Universe line. I have to tell you, while I do have some minor nitpicks and gripes with good old Dark Redeemer here, he is leaps and bounds ahead of the first Redeemer we ever got in this line, which was a very loose figure at the time, and since then I've had to make some modifications so he can stand on his own 2 feet, if you know what I mean. That said, the Dark Redeemer doesn't really have those issues. Yes, he's very top heavy because of the wings, but I can get him to stand, even without the hockey puck display stand, so that says a lot of how far this line has come since the first wave. That said, it isn't a more traditional style Redeemer, so I could see why some people may still favor this first one over the Dark Redeemer here, but as I always say, the Platinum Edition of the 3, if you want a traditional style Redeemer, that's definitely the way to go. Up next, here is the Dark Redeemer next to a couple other newcomers to the Spawn Universe line, Haunt and the Soul Crusher, another neutral force in the Spawn Universe comics. Noticing a pattern here, but going back to that Platinum Edition Redeemer I mentioned earlier, are we going to get a Platinum Edition release of this Redeemer too, with the same sword as the Platinum Edition of the first release? Because you guys know how much of a sucker I am for Spawn, and you know damn well if that thing is going to happen, I gotta have it. That's more money down the drain, I suppose, but with that being said, you can definitely tell how large and in charge these Redeemer figures are compared to a lot of the other characters in the Spawn Universe line. I even took the liberty of leaving these guys on their display stands just to give you an idea of how tall this Redeemer figure still is compared to them. I mean, I say this with the Gunslinger and Ravenspawn all the time, but wow. Just wow. And last, but certainly not least, we have our 2 regulars, the Mythic Legion's Brother Mandibulus, 11 Spawn, who's not towering over everyone today because, well, just look at this damn thing. That said, seeing good old Limited Spawn alongside the Dark Redeemer here makes me think that we could get a really badass modern take on the Wings of Redemption spawn, which I know would make my good buddy Brian Starner of Toy Nutsa very happy indeed. Or they could go a step further and give us the better articulated wings from the Batman Who Laughs Sky Tyrant to do that as well. That's something my good buddy Evil Villain mentioned, that you could possibly swap onto the Dark Redeemer here if you really wanted to. I think that might be a little bit more involved than a swap, but I also have yet to try that because my Batman Who Laughs Sky Tyrant is on display and I don't want to screw that up trying to get him out. So keep that in mind. But with that being said, and wrap things up, some final thoughts. Overall, and if like me and you're trying to complete the Spawn Universe collection, or if you've been holding out for a Redeemer figure in this line with a little bit more detail as far as paint applications go, then this guy is a definite must-have. However, if you're looking for a more traditional style Redeemer figure to add to your Spawn collection, then I would highly recommend you go with the Platinum Edition of the first release. That said, I only paid a whopping $7.50 for this version of the character, while I know that that Platinum Edition of the first release is going for a lot more than the initial retail price of it, $25. So keep that in mind while making your decision. However, since this is technically a new character to the Spawn Universe line and Spawn canon as a whole, in my personal opinion, I think you really need both to have a complete collection. That said, I'm also a sucker when it comes to Spawn and will pretty much buy a figure I already have, even if the only difference is paint or maybe a weapon. Case in point, the Gunslinger Spawn with a minigun. Even though I got that in the trade, it was something I probably would have bought anyways. So keep that in mind. I may be a little bit biased when it comes to Spawn because it is one of my top 3 things, along with Ghost Rider and Gargoyles, for those of you who don't know. So there is that. However, while I do really like this figure and the other 2 Redeemers we've got in this line, they all share some of the same quality issues in the fact that there is some joint looseness here and there, and the wings, while awesome, are very large and in charge and make the figure very top heavy and difficult to stand at times. So you're gonna want to use one of the DC Multiverse clip stands or a doll stand to help hold this guy up. But at the end of the day, for a ridiculously low clearance price that I got this guy for, I'm willing to accept all those issues with open arms because you just can't beat it, man. Especially when figures like Marvel Legends are going for $25 regularly. That still baffles my mind to this very day. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you're so inclined, please don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you know whenever I upload more reviews like this one. If you haven't already, please hit me up on Instagram at Overlord Productions. But as always, keep the comments civil, because the world sucks enough as it is, especially when you have to go by the name Forsaken. I mean, why is he Forsaken? And why didn't they call him that in the first place? I assume there's some religious meaning behind that, and the Todd father didn't want to get a lawsuit on his ass, but you never know. But with that being said, until next time, I'll catch you guys later.